Today is all about colors. This is going to be a more personalized video, as I won't be talking so much about color theory, but rather about ways that might help you in building up your own color palette. Color palette we choose for each illustration is something that helps us in building a consistent body of work. Colors create mood and atmosphere. They are one of the factors that can make our work recognizable and help it to stand out. You may have seen that most of established artists, maybe even some of the artists you like, have their favorite color palette based on their personal preferences. In my case, what I did at the very beginning when I started out with digital illustration was to use a very broad color palette without any limitations whatsoever. The thing is that I like absolutely all the colors, and so I didn't really know which direction I should go, which direction I should choose. So let me share with you some observations that I made and some tips. If you happen to be especially drawn to a specific color or color set at the moment, don't be afraid to explore it. I know from my own experience that exploring your temporary color fascinations might bring some really nice results. Right now I feel most attracted to cold color palettes and creating an interesting relation between cold hues and warm details, although I know it may change with time. A good tip is to start an illustration with a very limited color palette and expand it from there step by step while you're working. This is exactly how I learned to paint with oil paints and acrylics. You will see that you can easily create a whole piece using only 2 or 3 colors. But if you don't feel like committing to a very limited color palette, just go with your guts and use the colors you like. If you can, do so on different layers and then observe how, by hiding some of them, the whole illustration changes. It's a nice way to see which colors go best with each other and which ones add too much noise to the whole illustration. It's helpful to find sets of colors you really like. I love putting together sage with pink or yellow, exploring all the different shades of blue, greens and violets, and how well they work with warmer details. Take a look at your surroundings. What color schemes catch your eye when you're walking down the street, when you're shopping, scrolling down Pinterest, watching a movie or taking photos, and just save them for later. A little bit of color theory. Color theory might come in handy when building up a color palette. Let me show you how I use it in my work. Monochromatic colors are different variations, hues and tones of the same base color. I often start working with only one color that I want to be the leading one in my illustration. By changing its value, I can quickly and easily place the lighter and the darker spots at the very beginning, which allows me to keep my illustration on the right track through the whole process. Harmonious colors are the closest neighbors on the color wheel. They make a very balanced color palette. Whenever I see that the colors in my piece run out of control and there is too much noise, I recolor some parts using a shade that lays close to my leading color on the color wheel. Complementary colors are the ones that, when used one next to another, create the strongest contrast. They are the ones on the opposite sides on the color wheel. My favorite thing about them is that when used together, they make each other pop. I make the most use of monochromatic and harmonious colors when I work on the backgrounds or whenever I work on leaves and trees, just to distinguish one from another, but also to keep them very balanced. Complementary colors are definitely my favorite ones, You can see a very clear example of how I use them here in my illustration of the tiger. I simply placed the very nice and clear and saturated hue of blue on the fur of the tiger, so that the orange and the blue work nicely together and one makes each other pop. It's also good to think about saturation of your colors, which is simply the level of color essence. You can either prefer a more tuned down color palette, which means you will lower the saturation, or be a fan of really vibrant and highly saturated colors. Color palette based exclusively on highly saturated colors will result too electric and maybe even hard to look on, whereas a very desaturated one will give you an impression of muddy colors as they will look dirty. Some of my personal top color tips. I've never used black in my color illustrations or paintings. I've never even owned a black paint. The reason behind it is very simple. By adding black, you can very easily tune down the colors to a point where they look dirty. Instead of black, I use violet tones or colder hues to adjust my color value, its brightness or darkness. For example, whenever I want to place a shadow over some red color, I will probably just mix it with a little bit of violet rather than simple black. Complementary colors are my secret trick. I like adding blocks of complementary colors one to another, or just adding some tiny little detail, sometimes hardly visible, that will add some extra vibrance to my piece. For example, here I used pale pink just next to the mint color. Make use of color bars when working digitally. It may happen that sometimes you feel stuck with some color palette you're not so sure about. For me, the best solution in those cases is to spot the colors that feel off and lower or increase their value or hue using the color bar. Start with background colors. If your illustration has full background, just start with that. It's a base for your illustration, and so when it's well done, the rest of work will be easier. I never focus on the details first and always start with placing the overall colors to get the bigger picture. Make little color sketches. They don't even have to represent the exact composition, just the general idea. It's easy to see what leading colors will go well with each other and with your concept. A good example of an app you can use is Adobe Color Wheel. You can upload there any illustration that you made, and the app will extract colors from there and prepare a color palette for you. You can play with that, you can extract the colors yourself, save the palettes for later. You can also do so with a photo that you've taken and you really like the colors of it. Maybe that will be the base for your next illustration piece. If you don't want to download the color palettes, you can always take a screenshot of that and just base your future work on them. I will leave the link to the website and the app in the description below. There's no better way of finding out what works best for you than just practicing, trying it all out, and see what you like the most. Don't put any pressure on yourself, just draw and practice and observe the colors around you, and you will soon find the color sets that feel best for you and suit your work perfectly. Also, please let me know in the comments if my tips were useful for you or if there's anything else that you would like me to talk about. There's no better way of finding out what works best for you than just practicing, trying it all out, and see what you like the most. Thank you so much for watching my short tutorial for today, and see you next time. Bye bye!